Shalom uvracha from Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. We are proud to continue with the help of God our study of Pirkei Avot, of the ethics of fathers. We are studying this evening Perek Aleph, Mishna Yud Aleph, the first chapter, the 11th Mishna. The teacher of our Mishnah this evening is one of the great leaders of the community at that time, whose name was Avtalyon. In our previous study, we mentioned the joint relationship of the partnership of Shma'aya and Avtalyon. Avtalyon is an unusual name. According to early sources, maybe Avtalyon means the father of young children. Talya means a young child. Av, of course, means father. Maybe he was concerned with special feelings towards young children, maybe especially as a judge, maybe as the head of the Jewish court system. Maybe he always had to defend those who were defenseless, such as the orphans, especially young orphans. And maybe Avtalyon, according to that which we have mentioned in one of our previous studies, according to certain interpretation, Avtalyon himself was a convert. And maybe someone who goes through the difficulty of knowing what it's like not to have a family supporting them in their new endeavors. Ger shenitgayer ki katan shenolad. Every convert is in a certain sense like a young child. Every convert is on a level of a helpless person, because they don't really have brothers and sisters with them. Even if they have biological brothers and sisters, but in their new life, most of them don't have fathers and mothers and children. So maybe Avtalyon has special sensitivity to the impact that various activities can have on young children. Maybe we can see that in the reflection of our Mishnah. Perek Aleph, Mishnah Yud Aleph. Avtalyon Omer. Our great teacher Avtalyon teaches. Chachamim, wise people. He's scholars, people who are learned. He's Zaharu b'divrechem. Be careful with your words. There are many people who maybe they are great chachamim, but sometimes, God forbid, it happens that even people who are chachamim, people who are learned, people who are well versed, sometimes they don't necessarily teach in a way where everyone understands the message and where everyone is able to internalize the message. Well, the rabbis spend considerable time throughout the Talmud reminding rabbis to be able to teach in a way that the students really understand the message. Isn't it painful, isn't it shocking sometimes that people go to hear a certain great teacher and they come out with the message which is the antithesis, the exact opposite of the message that the rabbi was trying to present, but they misunderstood certain points. So Avtalyon says, be careful. I'll read you like the Rambam. He's a haru b'divrechem kishetabru b'amon b'nei adam sheyu divrechem pshutim u'mevoarim lakol. Speak in a way which can be readily understood. Sometimes, I'm not accusing any chachamim, God forbid, of this, but it can happen that sometimes a person wants to use certain kinds of language and constructs which are scholarly, chachamim. And maybe in their pursuit of great scholarship, they can lose the masses. They can lose the masses' understanding, and it's very, very important to do so. I remember hearing more than once from my beloved father of blessed memory. My Abba said, at the end of the book of Kohelet, it says, V'yoter shahaya Kohelet chacham od limad da'at et ha'am. I think the simple interpretation is, in addition to the fact that Kohelet was so wise, was the fact that he would teach the masses of people. But my father said, I remember whose name, he said, V'yoter shahaya Kohelet chacham. Maybe even a greater accomplishment, maybe even more than the fact that Kohelet was so wise, was that he knew how to teach masses. V'izein v'chiker tikein mishalim harbei. Sometimes somebody's on such an advanced level of chokhmah There is nobody who's smarter than Kohelet. According to our tradition, Kohelet is Shlomo HaMelech. Vayechkam mikol ha'adam, the number one chacham in world history. So how can he find the commonality of expression with even the most ignorant of people? That's the greatness of Kohelet. V'yoter, either in addition to the fact that he was so wise, or even maybe a greater accomplishment. And maybe that's the same word that's used in our Mishnah. Chachamim. Yes, you're Chachamim. He's Zaharu b'divrechem. Kidei shelo yavinu, says the Rambam, mitoch divrechem, hefech kavanatchem. B'davar sheyeh noteh leminut. Sometimes they could take your words and misconstruct them. And misconstrue them to the extent that the words that you're teaching to follow godliness can be taken to mean the opposite of the opposite of teaching. In Avot Rabbi Natan, which is the expanded form of Pirkei Avot, maybe someday, with the help of Hashem, we could dream at least of maybe studying together Avot Rabbi Natan. In Avot Rabbi Natan, it says many of the teachings of Pirkei Avot are quoted, and then there's an expanded form on many of the teachings. Chachamim hizaru b'divrechem, shema yoru davar mishimchem shelo ketalmud Torah. Shelo ketalmud Torah. In other words, you're speaking and you're losing part of your audience, so you're losing many people in your audience because they're not on your level of Chachamim. You're the Chachamim. Hizaru. V'af hatalmidim habayim acharechem, shema yoru davar mishimchem shelo ketalmud Torah. It will go against the teachings of the Torah. And the continuation of the Mishnah says, Shema tachuvu chovat galut. Who knows what will happen as a result of this? Because you will be involved in teaching, you'll be involved with students. You could end up in great exile, either literally in exile or spiritually in exile. V'tiglu l'makom mayim hara'im. Explained by our early commentaries. The Rambam writes about the other comment. Mayim harayim, the evil waters, means it's a euphemism for heresy. You can get people involved in heretical views if you're not careful. And that's why there were certain great people who were very, very exact in their mode of presentation because they were worried about the teachings of Av Talyon. Av Talyon was concerned. You have young people listening, and young people, there were teachings in Masechet Chagiga, exactly to whom is permitted to teach certain aspects of Torah. You know, people hear with what's the expression? They hear with an accent. You know what I'm talking about? Like they have selective hearing, selective memory. They hear what they want to hear. You know, and if it's not clearly understood, if it's not clearly explained, there's a danger. Shema tachuvu. V'nimtza shem shamayim mitchalel, says the Mishnah. The name of God will become desecrated. There'll be a desecration of God's name. And you're the chacham. You didn't intend to do so, but you weren't careful. So you have to be careful how you present your words, and perhaps, and sometimes, especially when you're teaching esoteric matters or matters which can be understood one way or another, maybe it pays to spend the time. Could someone please repeat what I said so that I make sure that the person understood it and internalized it correctly? Because in the Gemara, there are all kinds of teachings in the Masechet Chagiga, all kinds of teachings about how careful you have to be about certain aspects of Torah, in terms of the study of Kabbalah, for instance. Rav Kook wrote, and others wrote, that maybe some of the requirements that applied in earlier generations do not apply in our generation. Maybe as we get closer and closer to Mashiach, I think it was Rav Kook who said, it'll be so dark in the world, we'll have to shine the brightest lights of Kabbalistic teachings, the brightest lights that we have, so that everyone can see the light of God. I saw in many of the introductions to the translations of the Zohar into Hebrew, well, even though in earlier generations there were so many prerequisites, maybe today we can waive some of them. That's not my field, and I'm not on the level to make such decisions. But I can just tell you that there are some who say, be careful what you teach and to whom you teach it. The Avarbanel seems to learn that there are certain aspects of the Torah which, if a person doesn't understand properly, they can distort the messages of Torah. Let's say you're teaching the Rambam spent so many years, a whole section of the Guide for the Perplexed, a whole section of Moreh Nevuchim, trying to explain that the euphemisms in the Torah are not to be taken literally. Now, many people, it doesn't bother them. The hand of God, the face of God, the front of God, the back of God, the nose of God, the feet of God. That doesn't disturb them. But if you're not teaching properly, and someone can walk away with a message of a certain physicality to God, this could destroy worlds. Nimtzah Shem Shamayim mitchalel. Ein dorshim, says in Chagiga. Ein dorshim b'maasei b'reishit Chagiga Yud Aleph Amud Bet. Page 11b in Tractate Chagiga. Be careful, you're talking about Maaseh Bereshit. Well, who are you teaching? Ein dorshim b'maaseh Bereshit b'shnayim v'lo b'merkava. Let's say you're teaching the first chapter of Ezekiel. We love Yechezkel. We love Pirkei Avot Yechezkel. Everybody studies Yechezkel. It's part of Tanakh. We read it in all of the synagogues on the holiday of Shavuot. It's the Haftarah of the holiday of Shavuot. But even there, it's recommended that the person that should be called up to the honor of the Haftarah on the first day of Shavuot, when you read chapter 1 of Ezekiel, maybe it's proper to call up the rabbi of the congregation, the leader of the congregation, because how many people really can say they have mastered the understanding of chapter 1 of Yechezkel? If you don't know what I'm talking about, so study Yechezkel, but maybe study it with proper care, with proper tutelage. I don't know. So the Rabbi says, be careful. Ein melamdim sitrei Torah. Elo talmid chacham mevin midato libo do. That's what he said. The Rabbi says maybe we read v'tiglu l'makom mayim hareim, right? He says ra'ui she'yikarei tigalu. You're going to be revealing Torah in such a way. V'hamayim hareim, according to Rabbi, v'hamayim hareim kinui l'talmidim habilti hagurim. That's the makar of the mayim raim. That's the makol mayim raim. Be careful. You have a passion to teach. You're on a level of teaching, but you have to be cautious. Now, I know that there's something very beautiful about the fact that you should teach everyone. That's what I think. That's what I think we need. But Shmaya and Avtalion. Remember the famous story? Maybe we'll talk about it next week. Remember how Hillel couldn't get into the Beit Midrash because there was a certain guard, that there were certain requirements in order to get into the academy. That was the academy of Shmaya and Avtalion. So maybe there was a certain kind of maybe you had to make special efforts to get to hear the lectures of Shmaya and Avtalion. I'm not necessarily saying that that's the only way to teach Torah, but just be careful. The first 3 words of this Mishnah, I believe, are the guiding lights of our teaching this evening. Hizaharu b'divreichem. Be careful. Rav Shnei said, maybe people said it before, the Lubavitch Rebbe said, the word lihizaher comes from the word zohar, comes from the word shining light. Be careful that your words should really be shining lights to the students. The rabbis teach that you should teach in a precise fashion, in a concise way, in a way that's understood. And we pray that all the chachamim of the world should find the way to teach all of the people of the world in the proper way. The beauty of the Torah is that it has messages. Not the only beauty of the Torah. There are trillions and trillions of aspects of the beauty of the Torah. But I'm always fascinated that the words of the Torah can be studied by a beginning student who's 4 years old, and that same text is being studied by a 14-year-old who already has been learning for 10 years, and by a 34-year-old who's reviewed that text tens of times, by a 54-year-old, by an 84-year-old. Here's a scholar, he's 104 years old, and he's reading the same text. He's reading the same text that his great-great-grandson is learning in first grade, right? How is that? Because the Torah speaks on so many different levels. And there's a message there for everybody. Just make sure that you present. That doesn't exist in other disciplines, I don't think. There's no science book that you could use in kindergarten and in 5th grade and in high school, and in college, and in graduate school, and in postdoctoral programs. It's the same text. We use the same text, right? But just be careful. Chachamim, hizaharu b'divreichem. Avtalyon is so concerned to make sure that students don't make mistakes. It's the obligation of anyone who's teaching to carefully understand and properly choose his or her words in order to guide people properly and to avoid the desecration of God's name. Thank you so much for listening, Shalom.